the woods through Airbnb. Just for one weekend, I wanted to spend some quality time with my girlfriend Amanda among nature. We were taking our dog Spiff with us too. Amanda thought it was a great idea. We arrived there in the early evening on a Friday. I parked the car right in front of the house after driving for 2 hours. "This is wonderful, Milton. It's so peaceful and romantic," my girlfriend said as we got into the house. It was small but very cozy. It had a fireplace too, which, besides being pleasant, was also very convenient since it was the middle of January. Both Amanda and I were big fans of winter. Definitely, today we can just eat and rest by the fireplace. Tomorrow we can explore the surroundings during the day. The fresh air will be good for us. Clean our systems out, I said. "I'll prepare the food while you collect the fire. Just like the good old days, huh?" she replied. "Yeah, I'm starving," I said. Our dog Spiff, after being fed, was anxious to go outside. I wasn't very happy with the idea of letting him go out after night, especially in a foreign, wild environment, but he wouldn't shut up. Sometimes you just need to let dogs go out and do what they need to do. He's a smart dog, and according to what we read about the surroundings, there are no bears or other predators that could hurt him. "Come on," I said as I opened the door to let Spiff out. Within the next few hours, I and Amanda had our meals, and then we fell asleep sitting on a comfortable couch by the warm fireplace. We woke up when it was around 2 a.m., and I heard a dog barking in a painful manner deep into the woods. "Oh no, Spiff's in trouble," I said as I got up. "Are you going outside, Milton?" she asked. "Of course, I gotta go get him. That's why I brought my shotgun," I responded. On the other hand, it wasn't a good idea to bring Spiff. Lesson learned. "Stay here, Amanda, and lock the doors when I'm outside," I said as I picked up my gun and prepared myself to leave. "Okay, be careful," she said. So I walked outside the door and went into the woods, my left hand holding a flashlight and my right one carrying my shotgun. For a while, I was still able to listen to the noises of Spiff. He appeared to be in pain. I was now extremely concerned. The noise stopped, which didn't make me feel better. But still, I had a good idea of where the noise came from. I just hope he's all right. Maybe he fell into a hole or something. Maybe he was trapped, I said to myself, trying to be positive. After a while of walking through the trees and bushes, I heard something or someone. I tried to remain silent. I could hear someone breathing. I didn't know if it was an animal or a person. But then out of the blue, or should I say in the dark, I heard wicked laughter. I got hit in the head by something. It wasn't a rock or anything that could take me down, but it still hurt. "Damn, what the fuck? Oh my God, Spiff!" I screamed as I realized that the decapitated head of my dog was thrown at me. I was now listening to a house which resembled wolves. Someone was chasing me. I could see red eyes coming in my direction. It was a tall figure, like a man running on 2 feet. I didn't have time to figure out who or what it was. I was now running for my life. I heard it roaring and howling, but running like a man. I shot my gun in the air a couple of times and thought it would scare off the figure, but it kept chasing me, getting closer. "Amanda, open the door. Let me in, for the love of God," I shouted as I got closer to the house, leaving the forest behind me. I was surprised by 2 things. First, I saw the door was already open. Then, as I looked back, I noticed the creature was no longer behind me. It didn't leave the woods, perhaps frightened by the idea of getting shot. I entered the house calling for my girlfriend. Terrified, I realized the main room where we sat by the fireplace was a complete mess. The sofa and chairs were misplaced and destroyed. Broken glass, and then I saw my girlfriend lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. Amanda, oh my God. There was nothing I could do. She was dead. There were bite marks all over her neck, but the bloody floor revealed the footprints of a human. In tears, I called the police. It took them almost an hour to arrive at the house. I told them what happened. A few hours later, they searched the woods, but found nothing except what was left of my dogs. One of the police officers, a man in his 60s, spoke to me in private and said, "I shouldn't tell this to you, but I grew up in the small town nearby. Folks and legends believe in a dog-man creature, half dog, half man. When I was a kid, I didn't see anything like that, but as I grew older, I tried to convince myself my mind was just playing tricks on me. But the fact is, what you described as the creature chasing you is what killed your dog and your girlfriend. It's undisputed. The footprints bored in the house and in the surroundings are nothing more and nothing less than those of humans. Hopefully we can find out what did this to your girlfriend and your dog. I'm sorry for your loss. It's a complete tragedy. Months went on and nothing was ever found. A few articles and TV reports spoke about the case as they mentioned a cryptic legend of a dog man who lived in the woods. The evidence is, in fact, mysterious. Maybe that is true, but it doesn't matter because I would never get my girlfriend back or even my dog. Regardless of what is the truth, I will never visit any forest again in my life, and although it was not my fault, I will never forgive myself for what happened. This happened several years ago, which at the time was also my girlfriend's birthday. I wanted to do something romantic for her and get us a nice place to stay for a few days as a present. It was a good idea in theory, having a relaxing getaway with just the two of us in the middle of all the holiday traveling and family visiting. Unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. My first mistake was not booking far enough in advance. By the time the idea came to mind, it was already December and everything was sold out. And when I didn't have any luck with traditional hotels, I resorted to checking Airbnb. There weren't many Airbnbs available either, but I eventually came across one that was a cottage type, kind of out in the woods. It didn't have a good rating and the host was this mid-40s, decrepit-looking male. But overall, he seemed harmless and it was the only option I had. So out of desperation, I booked it. Fast forward a couple weeks later and it was my girlfriend's birthday weekend. When we finally checked in at the Airbnb retreat, the first thing we noticed was just how big it was. Aside from that, I thought it wasn't really in great shape, but my girlfriend was enamored with the cottage aesthetic, so I was glad she was enjoying her present. We met the host briefly at the front door, and then he showed us to our room and basically left us to our own devices, although as he was leaving, he mentioned something I didn't quite register at the moment. Not until after everything else went down. "I'll leave you two to be now. You won't ever know I'm here. I'm pretty good at going unnoticed," he said. "Thank you," I responded. "That was weird, right?" I asked my girlfriend. "At least we have the whole place to ourselves," she replied. "Yeah, you're right. Come on, let's check out the house." We spent the next few minutes touring the entire house, which took us a while as it was a fairly big property. Everything was decent enough to my standards, and it seemed like my girlfriend was content with Airbnb. However, there was one problem that was very unsettling once we noticed it. On all the windows in the house, there were no blinds or curtains of any kind. There were rods above the windows which made it obvious that there had been blinds, but they had all been taken down. There wasn't even a curtain in the window in the bathroom. Obviously, at that point, we were a little freaked out and concerned about our privacy. I texted the host and told him this was a serious problem. A few seconds later, the host responded back, more or less shrugging it off. He said that we were so far out in the woods that there shouldn't be any chance of a person coming by and trying to look through the windows, and also that with all the tree coverage, none of the windows got very much light anyway. Obviously, that wasn't a satisfying response for me or my girlfriend, but we tried our best not to be worried about it so we could be focused on having a good time. We turned in pretty early that night as we had a very long day. Of course, the window in our room didn't have any curtains or blinds either. I remember falling asleep with my eyes half open, looking at the snow coming down outside. For some reason, it was like I was hypnotized by the lack of curtains, and that's when I passed out. Hours later, around 4 in the morning, I woke to the sound of several notifications coming through my phone. I was very groggy and delirious, but I figured it might be important, so I forced myself to roll over and check it. It was Airbnb messaging me, and when I saw what my phone message read, I couldn't believe it. Airbnb was telling me to pack all my belongings and leave the property immediately. It felt like my entire world was crashing down before me. It almost seemed like I was dreaming. But what made the situation all the more disturbing was when Airbnb advised me to not notify the host until we are gone. That's when my heart sank to my stomach. Maybe it was something that Airbnb knew about the host that we didn't. A million thoughts raced through my mind. I assumed the man had to be a serial killer or something. I turned over to my girlfriend and began to wake her up, shrugging at her until she was finally, when I tried desperately to explain what was going on. But that's when I saw her eyes super wide. She gave me the most horrific, blood-curdling shriek I'd ever heard. "There's someone in the window," she screamed. I turned around in horror, and that's when I saw him. It was the host peering inside a room with his hands cupped around his face. I screamed and jumped back. That sicko didn't budge. He just stood there, watching us, pressed up against the glass. In a rage, I charged at the window and banged my fist against it, nearly shattering it, saying, "Leave us alone, I'm calling the cops." My girlfriend pulled me away from the confrontation, and we frantically began packing up all our things and got dressed. All the while, this creepy old man watched through the window the entire time. Within a couple of minutes, we left the room in a rush. I led my girlfriend to the house, running by the kitchen to grab a blade from the nightstand. As we cautiously made our way outside, I could feel the tension in the air. I didn't know if the creep would pop out of nowhere. Thankfully, there was no sign of him. As we headed to the car, me and my girlfriend quickly threw our stuff in the back seat and got inside and locked the doors. But just as we were about to leave, the man slammed his hand on the side of my window. I frantically drove off and never looked back. On the way home, my girlfriend was already drafting a serious complaint to Airbnb, asking why this guy was allowed to host people in his house in the first place. The only response we got was that they had received numerous complaints from other guests about how he broke Airbnb rules and regulations on multiple occasions. It just so happened that they revoked his status as a host while we were there. Either way, it's no mystery to me why that place is such a bad rating with that guy around. He strikes me as the kind of guy that probably has his dead wife stashed somewhere in his house. I owned an Airbnb house for several years. I stopped due to the stress of keeping up with it, as well as maintaining my actual job. The benefit of using Airbnb instead of running the place out like you normally would is that you would have the chance to make a lot more money if your house gets booked a lot. Being in a relatively high traffic area for vacations, Airbnb was a great option for us. My wife and I were excited in the beginning, but it got more demanding as more people booked the house. We needed to keep everything on schedule and hire cleaning services after the first customers left and before the next ones came, as well as be sure to respond to their messages and emails in a timely manner. But things were going well for a couple of years before we had what we thought was a young couple staying at the house. Just like every other time when they arrived, I texted them the unlock code for the door. I almost never actually see the customers. After they let me know that they were inside and everything was good, I sat back and relaxed for the rest of my day off. I should also mention that I almost never even talk to the customers more than just a couple of texts. Usually they text me when they get there and when they leave, and sometimes an occasional question about the house, but that's usually it. But as 9 o'clock came around and I was just about to get ready for bed, I got a text from the young man staying at the house. It was short, saying that he was going to call me in a minute, and then a minute later he called. I already had a bad feeling when I saw the text, but what he said still surprised me. He said that the water wasn't working in the house. Of course, I apologized, though I didn't understand how that could be possible. But living in a house without water is unacceptable, so I knew I had to get it fixed immediately. I asked if I could check it out really quickly so that I could have someone come in the morning to fix it. He agreed, being very polite about the whole thing, and I drove over there a few minutes later. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed 2 cars. At the time, this wasn't necessarily a red flag, but more just an odd thing I noticed because they were apparently a young couple on vacation for a single night, so I didn't understand why they would rent 2 separate cars. I thought someone must be visiting them, which usually isn't allowed, but I didn't mind so much. I walked up to the front door and knocked before entering the code and walking inside. It was very quiet. I expected them to be waiting for me, but they weren't anywhere that I could see. I probably should have looked around for them first, but I was tired and just wanted to get this over with. The first thing I wanted to check was the main water valve to make sure there wasn't a leak or a flood. So I went down to the basement and over to the valve. Everything seemed normal. No water anywhere or signs of damage. I was confused, but then I fiddled with the valve and immediately heard the water start rushing again. I turned it more, realizing it had been completely shut off. I stayed in the basement for another minute trying to understand why this was done before I started to get really uncomfortable feeling, especially since I didn't even see the people when I walked inside. I just couldn't see how it could have been anyone other than them who turned off the water, which meant they were trying to get me to come over on purpose or maybe give them a discount on their stay for the inconvenience. I decided I was going to leave and get in my car, then try calling them back just to be safe. I got up and started walking towards the stairs until I heard the basement door open, followed by multiple footsteps walking down. When they got to the bottom, 3 men stood there. "Is it fixed?" one of them said, sounding like the same man I talked to on the phone. Though all of these men were much older than the young man that I thought I was staying at the house, I told them it should be working now and that the valve must have been just tightened on its own. I was trying not to point any blame since the whole thing was making me so uncomfortable. I just wanted to get out of that basement and away from these guys. They all just kind of stood there looking at me, not saying anything after that. "Well, let me know if you need anything else," I said, walking between them and trying to get to the stairs. They still just stood there watching me walk around them. But as I went past the third guy closest to the stairs, I spotted a gun shoved in the back of his pants. It made me freak out a little, and I rushed a bit quicker up the stairs, but they didn't follow. They stayed in the basement as I quickly walked out the door and drove away. When I got home, I woke up my wife and told her what had happened. She convinced me to call the police to check up on them. They weren't the people we thought were staying there, and the situation was strange, so it felt justified. I think we waited 20 minutes before a call came from an officer claiming nobody seemed to be home and that he may need me to open the door. I gave him the code instead, and he called back another 20 minutes later saying that there was no sign of anyone still being there. The next day, we found out the card the man paid with was stolen, and after looking around the house, they had stolen some expensive decorations and appliances as well. I guess they were never actually a young couple either. The one thing that was left unexplained was their whole plan, with the water not working. I think they either wanted me to not charge them for their stay, so that hopefully they could use the stolen card for longer, or they were planning on robbing me at gunpoint. But then that makes me question why they didn't. 3 dangerous, unidentified men blocked my exit in the basement after leading me into a trap, and they just let me go. It doesn't make sense to me, but after that, I never went to the house while customers were home, and a few months later we stopped using Airbnb and just put the house up for rent.